What's up, everybody? This is another episode of Sports Ruben Life. This is Ruben here. I'm going to jump right into it, right? So I'm going to talk about UFC's relationship with ESPN, right? So ESPN recently signed a deal where UFC is going to be partnered up with them, and they're going to be coming out with an app, ESPN Plus, debuted with their relationship with the UFC, where if you sign up for $5.99 a month and you get access to a bunch of UFC cards, right? And you get access to the undercards, and it kind of streamlines, it kind of brings together all the undercard stuff that UFC's been doing. It was broadcasting on regular TV, and then you go to the app, and then it was a little bit fragmented, right? So ESPN has streamlined this process a little bit. If you sign up for ESPN Plus, you get a deal where if you pay for the whole year, you get a UFC main fight card, like UFC 245, 246, so forth and so on, right? So that being said, right, this has helped the UFC a couple of ways, right? The first piece of this whole thing where it benefits the UFC is you have this giant platform in ESPN, right? They have relationships. They've been in business for many, many years. I think it's 30 years now. They've been doing sports broadcasting. You know, they've been a network, right? They're on TV, they're on cable, they're on the internet, they have an app. So there's many avenues in which these fight cards can be promoted internationally, locally, and ESPN's known for just being in a bunch of different places, right? So there's that assistance there, right? You have this deal with each other where they're going to help each other grow, and ESPN has a long history in relationships with places that maybe the UFC's not had, right? So it allows them to help with advertisement, it allows them to make deals happen that were maybe a little bit more difficult, right? And before I get into that, that's going to be the next subject, but let me just finish this off. And then you have Disney, right? Disney's been in the entertainment business for 50, 60, 70 years. They're all over the world internationally. They have deals, distribution deals with everybody, and they have relationships where those relationships were built over many decades that people don't necessarily have access to, right? You have deals in China, you have deals in Russia, and so forth and so on. So all these deals that Disney, which owns ESPN, has, all these relationships that they have, you can cultivate those things over the course of decades. So ESPN has a little bit of that assistance from that, right? It's their parent company, and they can get into places that they probably wouldn't have got into. And consequently, the UFC having a relationship with ESPN, it all lends to each other, right? And so the UFC being one of the newest sports groups or sports types, you know, because you have you have baseball, basketball, football, hockey, and so forth and so on. You have the UFC coming in as a new kind of sports league, and they've been able to, by this relationship, they've been able to get into places they haven't. They've been able to make deals which they probably wouldn't have, right? And it goes to my next point of securing these deals, right? So fighters in the past with the UFC, because Fox's relationship with the UFC wasn't the greatest. So in other words, they didn't promote the fighters, they promoted the UFC. So by ESPN really promoting the fighters, they've been doing these detailed things where they've been showing how the fighters fight and breaking down their styles, and then you do these other interviews, and you know, and a good example is the Conor McGregor Donald Cerrone fight I covered in. Immediately after that fight got announced, you have the ESPN.com. There's 5 or 6 articles. There's Twitter. There's Instagram, Facebook. There's all these postings that you're seeing all this, and it instantaneously started creating buzz, right? You didn't have that before. The way the UFC worked before was the fighters themselves created their own buzz in a way. That's why Conor McGregor was so influential in the UFC, right? That's why he was able to come in and do the things that he did, have some of the most successful pay-per-view buys in the fight in UFC history, because of the fact that he's a tremendous character figure, personality, that he's a true prize-fighting entertainer, that he's able to sell all these fights, right? So Conor McGregor realized his worth. He transitioned it into something else in his Proper 12 whiskey, and now he's valued at over $1 billion. He has a $1 billion plus company that's in 9 or 10 countries, and he's doing very, very well, right? So he utilized his fame and entertainment value, his celebrity value, and he transitioned into something else that he doesn't necessarily have to fight anymore. That was the old method. Fighters didn't even understand this, and established fighters like Cowboy Cerrone, who has fought basically, you know, he has 30 fights, 40 fights. He has a ton of fights. He has the most fights in UFC history, victories. And so a guy like him who's maybe not as charismatic, not as business savvy, he suffered a little bit with how all that worked, right? So that's where ESPN came in and has helped Donald Cerrone. The likes of Stylebender, the likes of all these other fighters now are being showcased on a giant platform that not only grows the UFC, but it gives these fighters an opportunity to build a life outside of fighting, right? It increases their value, their Q rating, which in turn increases their marketability for sponsorship and so forth with that, right? So ESPN has helped that. So if you notice, if you follow the mixed martial arts, you notice that you follow the UFC, it's been harder and harder for these people, it's been harder and harder for Dana White and company to book these giant fights, because these fighters like, I want Conor McGregor money, but they don't have a Conor McGregor personality, right? Or persona. They don't have that mass entertainment appeal that is transcending beyond sports, essentially, right? He's an entertainer. So that being said, they were having a difficult time booking mega fights, right? Now you see all these mega fights being booked, right? UFC 245 has 3 championship level fights, right? And that's the smallest announcement. That was the lowest one, right? That's the least of all the entertainment fights that were announced. Conor McGregor, Cowboy Cerrone. This is going to be the first time that Conor McGregor is going to be available for the ESPN marketing team that's going to help him catapult his career even more. He's fighting for his brand now. He's not fighting because he loves fighting. He's fighting to keep his brand at the momentum level that it is right now. So he keep growing his whiskey brand, his clothing brand, his sports program. He has like a McGregor Fast where it teaches you how to be a better fighter and, more nutritionist, all that kind of stuff, right? So he's trying to grow all that. That's where his motivation is coming from, but he's going to piggyback it on ESPN. Thus, consequently, he's going to be able to increase his Q rating amongst people that are not sports fans, and thus people will probably participate in his auxiliary things that he's doing, right? The whiskey, the clothing, the athletic programs, right? So that is what's an interesting thing about this fight card that's coming up in January, is that's going to be the first time that the person that carried the UFC in terms of promoting it is now going to be partnered with this new arm of the UFC in ESPN that is the promotion of it now, right? It's the promotion arm of it that's really doing really well. They're doing really well with the app. Everything's doing tremendous. Fighters are making a little bit more money. And so that goes to the everything else, right? The next thing I see with the UFC is changing their relationship with Reebok, maybe going to Under Armour, which, by the way, I think is going to happen. I said it here first. That's why The Rock is involved with the UFC, because his relationship with Under Armour. Under Armour is politicking his way into getting into a relationship with the UFC, which could be giant, because now you're partnering up with somebody who has 162 million followers on Instagram in Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Tremendous, right? And so, anyways, that being said, I think that there's a huge connection here between why all these fights are being booked, right? You have Khabib signed with Tony Ferguson. Obviously, there was more money on the table. They both did it, right? Then you have Joanna Champion fighting Weili. She's trying to get her belt back, right? And you just have this UFC fight card 245. When you have Amanda Nunes, the champ, fighting as the third person in the card, right? It's a 5-round, they're all 5-round bouts because they're all champions, right? Then you have Max Holloway fighting the second. Then you have Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman headlining that card. There's a reason why all those guys were able to sign, is because there's more money in the pot now and it's more appealing. And if you keep winning, you'll be showcased on ESPN, which means you'll be more popular. Now it's up to the fighter and his team to transition this into a successful career outside of fighting, right? The next phase of your life. So anyways, that being said, if you like this video, like, subscribe, tell me what you guys think. I really like this idea that ESPN is really catapulting the UFC and how they're marketing the fighters and the fighters' lives and their stories and what they do. It's really tremendous for what ESPN has come in and done. I don't know if any other organizations could have really had that kind of a big impact on it, but I think that partnership was perfect. And whatever the dollar amount was, I'm sure that they've gotten all their money back. And I don't know how long this relationship was, but it needs to continue, because I think you're going to see the UFC get to another level. So thanks for watching. Bye.